All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here and for hanging in. It's a nice day today. This is, I believe, is the last session before lunch today. So maybe we'll get some time to go outside and wander around in the sun. I want to introduce Oksana Wasilik, who is a colleague of mine. We get to work quite closely together. Oksana is an instructional designer at UW-Casper. And she's going to be talking about instructional technology challenges in faculty-led study abroad courses.
Thank you, Meg. So let me thank you for the introduction, so I won't be introducing myself. I just wanted to explain to you why I chose this topic and why this topic fascinates me. Obviously, I'm an instructional designer, so I like technology, and I'm also very passionate about international education. So I had an opportunity last summer to go to the country of Georgia. I have to be very precise, because a lot of times when I was telling people that I'm going to Georgia, they didn't realize that I'm going abroad. So I went to the country of Georgia, and I was invited to do a technology training there. And so that's when I started thinking about using technology in an international setting. And also I have quite a few faculty in Casper who are doing study abroad programs. And so they would once in a while come to me and ask for advice about using technology in their study abroad classes. And I realized that I cannot be very helpful oftentimes to them. So, and I would rather need their help to figure out how things work in an international setting. So I started looking into this topic, and then I also realized today, after a roundtable that Reed Skull led, that my study actually is applicable to virtual study abroads too. So I think that people who are interested in doing virtual study abroad may find some interesting information from what I've learned. So a little background, and those of you who were yesterday at the opening session, you probably hear, oh, sorry, I'm trying to use two devices at the same time, so I have to be better coordinated. So Sarah Robinson yesterday, who is coordinating study abroad programs with the international programs at UW, mentioned that we have about 30 faculty-led study abroad programs per year, those short-term programs. Also, UW students go, and UW faculty take their students to various locales. Most of them take them to urban setting where technology is available, and they take students to the higher education institutions, so you would have better access to whatever technology you need on those settings. But a lot of them do take their students to the rural area. They organize field schools and trips in the country. So those are the limitations that the faculty have to be prepared to deal with. They also take students to various types of countries. So they can take them to Europe, they take them to Africa, they take them to Asia. So they have to really be prepared to understand the differences in the country infrastructure that they're dealing with. By country infrastructure that relates to using technology in teaching, I mean is wireless available there? Is cellular coverage acceptable? And things like that. So this can be different. And you would be surprised, like when I started doing my research, I assumed that all those economically developed countries like United States, Europe, and Canada, they would be definitely superior in their technological development and their infrastructure than those less fortunate, less developed countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And I discovered that I was wrong with that. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I interviewed a number of people. So I started with my colleague who takes her students to Kenya to do the service learning class there, and she's there on the picture. Her name is Lydia Nana, and she has been doing it for a number of years, and she was the one who brought it to my attention that actually in Kenya, infrastructure is sometimes better than in Wyoming, United States. And so she takes her students to both urban and rural area, and they have really great cell phone coverage in Kenya. So the thing is that the cell phone technology is not compatible with the majority of American companies. So if you're bringing an American phone, you're probably going to be out of luck. But if you buy a local cell phone, just something cheap and with a local provider, you will be able to have cell phone reception pretty much everywhere. And if you also buy a Wi-Fi modem, then you will have internet connection pretty much anywhere. Also, the problem that they have in Kenya, primarily in rural area, is the infrastructure problem with electricity. So the students were instructed to have their devices always charged. So they always stayed at the hotels that would have electricity, but they will need to bring devices to the field with them that are fully charged. So they had to plan around that. Also, what I learned about Kenya, that it does not have internet censorship, and I will talk about internet censorship just a little bit later when I start talking about China. But so pretty much people in Kenya can access anything on the internet they want. So, and of course, while courses work, they're just fine. And what Lydia did with her students, she required some threaded discussions with them and also uploading some pictures and photos that they took. So for this purpose, Kenya's infrastructure worked very well with the technology. So the next person with whom I talked was Lily. She takes students to China. She's also UW Casper faculty. And she primarily spends time with her students in the urban setting in Beijing. But there are some tricky things about using technology in China. First of all, Wi-Fi is available in a lot of places, but oftentimes it requires authentication. And to authenticate with Chinese Wi-Fi, you need to have Chinese cell phone number. And in some places in China, to access Wi-Fi at the airport, for example, you need to scan your passport. So you need to authenticate with your ID. So that was quite interesting. And the other thing that the students in Lee's class ran into is that internet censorship that blocks access to the sites that we assume are a norm in our daily life, like Google, for example, or YouTube, you know. And if you build your curriculum around those tools, you can just forget about using this content in your class. So it can be very tricky to figure out how to use that in China. And so, for example, in Lee's class, she required her students to blog about their experience. And so she had to come up with some Chinese blogging websites. One of them was Sina, and then she switched, I think, to something else just recently because she found out that they were not very user-friendly for students who did not read Chinese characters. So and the instructor also was, and so I characterized her use of technology in her class as kind of middle level of use of technology. And so the next instructor with whom I had an opportunity to talk, she took her students to Spain. And in Spain, you know, Europe, you would expect internet available everywhere, electricity available, so infrastructure would not be a problem in most cases. And the students were living, I believe, in the residential dorms at one of the universities in Barcelona, so they really had the same access to technology that they would have at UW. But the instructor required some of the assignment submissions in the form of the video, and so this was quite challenging for the students and for the instructor to support the technological needs of the students. And this happens all the time, even like in any class that has video submission requirements. So once you produce a video, you need to make sure that it's a certain file type, that you need to compress it to a certain size, that you can put it in an online shell, and that it's compatible, you know. So all those things, they have to be worked out in advance. And so her students were struggling with that. And also because they were using multiple platforms, some of them used iPads, some of them used Android phones and other like tablets. So this was a little bit different process for different platforms. So this was quite challenging for this particular instructor. And also, she did not, I think, plan for the students to struggle with file conversion. Like, for example, even converting their Word documents into PDFs. And so all those things, so she was very high-tech in her needs, but there were some issues with the students as far as their use of the devices and conversion of the files. And then finally, I went to Georgia, and this was pretty high-tech because I was teaching faculty how to use technology in teaching, so imagine that. And I thought that I will do really great because, well, I'm an instructional designer, I know how to deal with it, right? And I did have one major struggle that I didn't anticipate that. The thing was that we discussed that the training will be in English, so I didn't prepare the tools for the compatibility with any other script. And then when I came there, they told me, is it going to work with our Georgian script? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't test, you know, so that's what happened to me. And because even though the instructors were trained in English, but they planned to use those tools with their native language. I was lucky that everything worked out fine, but this was something that I've learned about training in a foreign setting. You need to plan for a non-Latin script for the tools, because obviously, especially some cloud-based tools, they're not working well with the non-Latin scripts. So, so things to consider, something that I just wanted to summarize about what I've learned from all those conversations and my personal experience while teaching abroad with technology. Infrastructure is big. So again, what is important? Wi-Fi availability. Usually, you can be safe and assume that Wi-Fi is available in public spaces, for example, coffee shops, hotel lobbies, university or college campuses, places like that. Malls sometimes. Then cell phone coverage it needs also to be considered because, for example, in Kenya, it's obviously way superior than we have it here in Wyoming. And so you can plan on even having small little projects submitted even in a rural setting in Kenya, especially if you have a Wi-Fi modem purchased there. So this is a possibility. And then electricity is big, obviously, especially in rural areas in African countries. And I talked with Warren, who is here, and you are planning a study abroad, a virtual study abroad with students in Ghana, and that's the same issue there, right? The availability of reliable electricity supply. So this is something to consider. Then internet censorship, that's what I was going to talk a little bit more about. So I mentioned that China has a big issue with internet censorship. When I started doing my research about internet censorship, I actually found out that United States is also censoring a lot of its data. So among the countries that were in red, there were China, there were Iran, a lot of Middle Eastern countries, some of the countries in North Africa, like Egypt or Sudan, you know, or Ethiopia. But United States was one of those countries, and when I started doing my research, I found out that we do censor internet access, especially in public libraries and K-12 settings. So that's the way how we censor it. So, and this affects the populations who do not have access to the internet at their homes. So this is something for us to consider as educators too, by the way. But in general, if you're planning to go to a country like China or Russia even, that is modeling, I think it's internet censorship after China right now, that you do not plan on availability of those cloud-based resources like Google apps or YouTube or something like of that sort in a foreign country. So this is something to consider. Then technology compatibility is a big thing, and I think this is the one that we're used the most, different types of outlets, different voltages. Also, that non-Latin script comes to the same, to the same category, because I didn't consider its compatibility, the software compatibility with non-Latin script in a foreign, setting. And so this was something that was a big learning for me. Also, I've learned to plan as low tech, to plan to be as low tech as possible in a foreign setting. Just, even if you want to be using videos and stuff like that, always plan for failure, and always plan how to minimize this failure, and there are multiple ways you can do that. First of all, you can just limit the types of tools or apps or software that you will be letting your students use when they're producing their videos, or you need to make sure that they've downloaded all those apps in advance, because you don't know whether they will be able to do that abroad because of the bandwidth and things like that. But always be as low tech as possible. Like, for example, I'm presenting today, I'm very low tech, and because I know how easy it is to fail on a computer that is not mine, or with the internet connection that I'm not familiar with, so things like that. So this is very important. Also, for example, in case of the study abroad in China, the faculty was using the cloud-based tools, the blogging tools that were available in China. So she used Cineblog, and then she used Laughter. That was the second one that she moved to, that she thought that it was more user-friendly. And I think another thing to consider when you are planning for a study abroad, mobile learning, use of mobile learning. Usually most people here have smartphones, and even abroad most people have smartphones nowadays, or tablets. And I think if you plan to use technology, it's better to use portable devices. It's just more convenient, in this case. But if you're planning that your students will be primarily using portable devices, that in this case you have to be really prepared. You have to give them the list of apps. You have to give them very clear instructions about how they're going to be using them for specific assignments that you want to do. And you also, if you're planning to use a wire courses shell, you need to make sure that it's working in the wire courses app, in the Canvas app. So this is an important thing to do, because not all of us test our wire courses shell for the use on the mobile devices. And in this case, we definitely should do that. So those are a few things that I've learned. And if you have any questions, I will be very happy to try to answer. So here's my contact information if you want to talk with me about anything related to technology issues. I think I finished 10 minutes early, so you can go and enjoy some time outside. Yes?
Wait, let me bring you a mic. Thank you. So that we can get you on the recording, Kaisa.
One of the things that we hear from, mostly from students, but sometimes from faculty studying abroad or working abroad, is challenges with accessing our licensed library resources. And I'm just wondering if you heard any feedback on that. We've worked hard to make them available, but I wondered if you had insight into that.
I did have issues like that, and there are ways. When I lived in Russia and I tried to use UW library access, because of the Russian IP, I think they were, that the University of Wyoming was treating it as suspicious activity, and so that was the issue. And so you had to, actually, there are ways to make to make the University of Wyoming or whatever it is to treat you as a US IP, so there is like a proxy thing, you know, so that's what I did. I always switched to US IP when I was doing that, and so this was not an issue. Another issue similar to that, like if, for example, if you're traveling even to Europe and you go and just type Google, it automatically takes you to that country's Google version. And there are ways to go into settings and switch it back to American version if you want to have it, because it also influences the search, you know, when you're doing things like that, and just the language. So those are the related things. And so there are little tricks around that.
Other questions?
I think we should.
Thanks, Oksana.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming.